Welcome to the Few and Far Between podcast. I'm your host, Chris O'Brien. W.B. Yeats once wrote, "How can we tell the dancer from the dance? In biotech, it pays to be a good dancer. You need to rely on your experience to identify potential IP in a competitive and crowded industry." Today's guest understands both science and strategy, and also Yeats, recognizing budding success as well as opportunities for growth amidst the wreckage. Aoife Brennan is the president and CEO of Climb Bio, a biotech committed to developing better treatments for immune-mediated diseases. On today's episode, Aoife takes us on a journey that spans Kilkenny, Ireland, Harvard Medical School, and her expansive roles across drug development, from chief medical officer to CEO. We'll also get the inside scoop on the differences between those two chairs, CMO and CEO, how to build teams that deliver, and balancing self-worth with a strong desire to learn. I've been looking forward to having Aoife on the pod for a long time now, and I know you're going to enjoy this one. Okay, let's get started. Aoife Brennan, welcome to Few and Far Between.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be on.
I have been looking forward to this conversation. I think we could call this something that's a year and a half, 2 years in the making, right?
I know. Yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah, I think we first started talking when you were at your previous company, and that's part of the story we're going to tell, but how you got to Climb and all of the stuff that you've been doing here, which is really exciting. I'm delighted to be in your beautiful offices today. But let's start a little with your background. So there you were, a wee lass in Ireland.
Oh, God.
How did it all start?
We're really going into the West now.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you're right. I grew up in Ireland. Grew up actually in rural Ireland, so down in the southeast in Kilkenny.
Okay.
Went to med school in Dublin. Always thought that I wanted to be an academic physician. That was kind of the pinnacle of career achievement when I was kind of coming up through med school. And then met a guy who was my boss, when I started working in a hospital, who really wanted to come to the States for a year.
Is that how it all began?
Yeah. I used to, earlier in my career, I hesitated as describing my story as I was the trailing spouse. I followed my husband, and that's how I ended up here. I used to kind of tell this story that I was like driven by ambition.
I had a vision about America.
I really knew I wanted to be a biotech CEO, and I started studying for it, but that's not really what happened. I think you get to a stage in your life where you're okay with your truth and your background, and that's kind of where I am now. So, but I was a trailing spouse. We moved when my first son was 6 weeks old, so I had this tiny little baby, broke my mom's heart.
Of course,
took the first grandchild out of the country.
Ripped out of the country, out of the womb of Ireland.
I still hear about that, and I still think she holds out hope that that I will move back. She's probably actually one of the few people who will watch this, so I have to shout out to my mom. But so we ended up came for a year and never went back. I mean, it's kind of the classic story.
And did you come to Boston, which
of
course is the typical, if you're Irish and you're coming, it's here. It was here in New York for 150 years.
It was funny because there were a couple of, my husband was interviewing for a bunch of roles, and it's really tricky to be in a kind of two-career family.
Of course.
And at the time I thought, well, you find your role and then I'll kind of slot in. And it's just funny how that kind of dance of career decisions has kind of followed us throughout. I'm still married to him.
Yeah.
We now have 3 boys, all Irish names. And the first one, who was this tiny baby when we moved, is now like a 6'3", BU junior. So it's kind of crazy how time flies.
That's wonderful, and I think it's great that you share the sort of candid version of the story. I think a lot of times when we look back on our careers, it's very easy to tell a through line kind of story, and there's kind of one in hindsight, but at the time, of course, we're all just stumbling along trying to figure it out.
I know.
And when I'm talking to young people, college age or 20-somethings who often are really overwhelmed by the world, it's my kids, their friends, others, it's really helpful to hear that people just sort of figured it out.
Stumbled on it. I know.
Yeah.
Kids spend all this time, searching for their passion. And they expect that they're going to find that and it will be this guiding light for their career.
Yeah.
But often it's kind of random. Your curiosity takes you in a certain direction. You follow it. An opportunity opens up. You jump through that door and, the rest kind of just happens.
Yeah, so. Chris Rock has a line about that that's like, follow your passion if it pays or if it's hiring or something like that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, but did you know, when did you decide being an academic physician was not the final role for you?
Yeah.
Was that in Ireland still or over here?
Yeah, no, I think the first aha moment, and it's funny how when you look back in your career often, there's like, I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but I can remember this moment when the first Christmas that we were here in the US, we went back to Ireland and came back, landed in Logan, got in the car, turned on the radio, which was the first shock, like hearing the American accents and the voices, having been back in Ireland for, 2 weeks. And then we're going down Starr Drive and the Sit-Go sign comes into view. And my husband was like, oh, it's so great to be home. And I just had this like, what are you talking about?
Home?
This is not home. This is not home. But I think something happened in the back of my mind, kind of clicked at that moment and said, there's a good chance we may never go back.
Wow. And
so, when we came here, it was with the, very distinct purpose that we were going to work a year, 2 max. In hospital academic medicine and then move back. But I think that was the first kind of moment when I started to open up, okay, we may be here for longer than I anticipate. And I really need to start thinking about what's going to satisfy me, not just for kind of another 6 months, but like, what would that path look like for me professionally? And that kind of started that kind of, the cogs turning around, where do I see myself? Do I see myself continuing to work, where I am versus doing something else? And then I think the second moment came when, you mentioned you were at Harvard Business School yesterday. Yeah. So I had this opportunity towards the end of the first year to do a program that at the time was called Scholars in Medicine. But one of the things they did was they sent you for a semester to the business school, which was a complete eye-opening experience for me. I never saw like any opportunity outside of academic medicine and that kind of career path. And I remember coming home one like snowy afternoon in the middle of winter to my husband, and they just kind of formed teams to do a business plan where they would give you a piece of IP from the Harvard system, and you would work with your MBA colleagues and PhD colleagues and put together a business plan and then pitch at the end of it. That was kind of the project. A complete fish out of water experience for this like geek, right, from Irish geek, MD, like no idea. I couldn't even like balance my checkbook.
Right.
And I remember my husband saying to me, I don't know what you're doing now, but like you're super energized by it. You just seem like you're really having fun. And, I see the light in your eyes. And when somebody who's close to you makes that observation about you,
that's really cool.
It's like, that is an indicator, right? That's a flag that maybe you should move in that direction. And sure enough, a couple of months later, I got a call from a recruiter that there was a biotech company in the Boston area looking for a physician. And I said yes.
What was the role?
So it was a classic entry-level medical director. It was pretty unusual at the time because I'm an endocrinologist by training. And when I kind of explored industry careers, I was told, you either have to go to Indianapolis and work for Lilly on the next insulin.
Yes.
Lilly has changed a lot, obviously, and I love to work for Lilly now, but that was kind of like, okay, that can't happen.
That doesn't seem right. Yeah.
Or you stick, where you are and stick what you're doing. But this company was a really cool company, and it's funny because the science has taken a while to mature. I think, the move and the science was right. It was probably just a little too early, but they were developing an immunotherapy for new onset type 1 diabetes, which is a hot area now. Hot area now. But this was kind of one of the first companies. There was no path. This is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
No path, called Tolerex. Really exciting company. Great first experience in industry for me. A lot of the feedback I got was, you need to go somewhere like, go to Merck or go somewhere where they can train you and there's a formal training program and a rotational program. But this company just had really experienced people in there. So I had this opportunity to wear a lot of hats, but also learn from people who had 10, 20 years experience. So it was the perfect setup for me. And I just learned really quickly. And within 6 months, I was just like, I'm never going back. This is it.
So what's the framework? So imagine you're giving this advice to you 20 years ago, somebody else who's thinking about coming out, and they're hearing, and I've heard that same advice being offered to academic medical folks. You should go to a big company and you'll learn the proper way to do it and blah, blah, blah. Do you sort of think that is generally good advice, or do you think, no, there are small and medium-sized companies, if you can find, X, Y, and Z, you should think about that?
Yeah. It's really about there's a climate and then there's a microclimate. And when you come as an entry-level medical director, what's really going to determine, the CEO of the company is irrelevant,
Yes.
right? Like, or people that are like, 10 levels above you in the org chart. It's really the people that are around
Your
you and
immediate
working
circle.
with you. And
Yeah.
not just do they have the experience, they need to have the experience and the right mindset to be able to mentor you and bring you along, and the patience to explain all the terminology,
Mm-hmm.
and to work with somebody where you can help them see that they're adding value,
Mm-hmm.
but yet, have a lot to learn. And, I've now, brought people over from, straight out of academia or out of clinical practice. And, it only works a proportion of the time, because I think it's part of it is the seed and part of it's the soil, right? Where you land. But you also need to come in with the right attitude of, like, you are learning a new language. You're learning you can't bluff it. If you don't know what you're talking about, ask. And respecting the multidisciplinary team, but then also being prepared to kind of train them on the clinical aspects and what you know from the clinic. And the people who get that balance right of, like, knowing their own self-worth and what they can bring to the table, but being open to learning, I think ultimately are the people that I see just really accelerating through. And, a lot of them now are CMOs or, doing really great things across the industry, because they've kind of had that right combo.
So I think you said two important things there. One, there's a diagnostic on yourself you should do if you're thinking about making this move. And it's a little bit, how flexible am I? How willing am I to learn a new language? Which really, the business of biotech is very different, as you said, from academic norms. The expectations are different. The way you sort of, stretch your stuff and show that you're good, right? All of that is different. So am I a person who is ready to do all of that? And then if I'm a yes on that, I think you're saying look hard at the team immediately around you and see if they're the folks that can help you with the kind of onboard into that.
Because somebody with great experience, if they don't have the time to actually sit and mentor you and bring you along, is absolutely useless.
Yeah.
And somebody who's who's never done it before and you're trying to learn from them, that's also useless. So you kind of need, like, everything's a 2x2 table, right? You need people in that outer quadrant who both have the experience themselves and also have the time and the willingness and the kind of just
personality
to actually want and generosity.
Yeah, generosity
to
is a
be
great
able
word for
to, bring you and mentor someone just completely new, because for the first couple of months you're going to be, like, asking them more than you're helping them. So I think that's super important.
Now, what you didn't say is pick a high-flying stock or a fancy scientific advisory board or a hot asset class. You didn't say any of those things, right? Yeah, especially for a young person. I think that's great advice.
No, I mean, just look at what's happened over the last.
God, the wreckage that we've seen.
I know, it's like nobody can predict.
Nobody.
No one can predict. You can go to, a big pharma company and your entire, group
can get wiped out,
eliminated.
Yeah.
So those things, we can't tell the future.
Yeah.
And any of those things.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, for goodness sake, 3-4 years ago, gene therapy was hot, and so everyone was building, and now you see companies just completely, taking a knife, a machete to that whole part of their business and just cutting it off. So those things are so hard to predict. I think you have a much better chance if you surround yourself by good people, because
I love that.
Things will come, things will happen for you on the other side, even if it's a failure.
Yeah, so somebody said to me, and I like this a lot, like, accept the fact that you're probably going to choose wrong out of the gates. In other words, you're probably not going to land at the next, rocket that does everything right and the drug gets approved and, gets sold for $1 zillion. Just accept that and instead try to really focus on the learning part of it. And I heard one person responded to that. This was at a thing yesterday. One person responded to that like, well, that's kind of, are you suggesting, like, to just come into it with a failure mindset? No, that's not it at all. You're going to try really hard, but just allow for the possibility that you need to be able to define the success a little bit differently.
Yes,
right?
100%. You can be a success in a project that ultimately ends up in failure. And I think people who are experienced in this ecosystem can tell the difference. I joke, it's like a Yeats poem, like, tell the dancer from the dance. And I think when you've observed enough,
oh my gosh,
you
she's
can tell the
quoting
difference.
Yates.
You can tell the difference.
Aoife Brennan, you had me at hello. Yeah, no, I agree. So then how do you get to Biogen?
So that's a good story. So that company was, great experience for me. After 3 years, investors decided it was going to be a long road to get the science. And we now have a product approved on the basis of that science, right? So we do have the first product approved to intervene and prevent, type 1 diabetes. But at the time, that was very early. There was a long road ahead. And the, first big lesson was, the the speed and the rapidity of the company shut down and everything being laid off. And so I was then like, oh my goodness, now I have no job. I've gone out on a limb. The limb got cut off.
No more limb.
No more limb.
Yeah.
So that was kind of this big, existential career situation of like being laid off. And when you're coming from a clinical background, to get laid off is really hard, right? Like you really have to do something egregious. But this is just, it's the business.
How the system works.
This is just the biotech ecosystem, right? And you have to get comfortable with that. But at the time, I was not comfortable with that. My husband was not comfortable. We had 2 young kids.
Right.
It was difficult. And so I interviewed, and, I think another kind of lesson learned to people coming up, once you have navigated that language barrier and you've demonstrated that you're somebody who can work with a team, who can deliver, who can get stuff done, the world's your oyster, right? So often it's hard to break in, to get your foot in the door, but then once you establish a reputation for yourself, you have 1 or 2 people who are respected in the industry who can kind of speak for you and say, Chris is a solid citizen, he did the right thing, the project didn't work out, but he was a great player. That really opens up a lot of doors.
Makes a lot of sense.
And so I had really lucky that I had a bunch of options and opportunities at that time. Some of the people I interviewed with back then, I'm still stayed friendly with and network with. But Biogen was one of the decisions that I made. At the time, I thought I was making the wrong decision, but went for it anyway. And it turned out subsequently to actually be a great decision. But it was a very heavily neuroscience. Well, I'll tell you, it was a very heavily neuroscience company. They were looking for somebody to be a development lead for Avonex. And this would have been like maybe 2010. Avonex had been approved in 1996 or something. So it was like one of the most boring jobs. I know. So it was like, get a pen developed, get this product approved in China. 2 very important skill sets, by the way. Drug device combo and China development. I'm still harvesting some of what I learned back then. But,
That's funny.
At the time, there was I had an opportunity to join Alnylam. There was an opportunity with Shire to work on some. And
Alnylam was probably kind of a high flyer at that time?
No, they just done their second riff. It was and that was kind of like,
not a high flyer.
Yeah. So no, it was like part of the, the twists and turns. So it was just at a period of time. Where they were kind of still trying to find their way. And so I interviewed at Biogen, just really loved the culture there. There was just something about the vibe and being very science-centric and very kind of a lot of responsibility on the medical directors in terms of determining the strategy and everything else. And I loved this concept of you manage your own program, but you actually had insight into other programs. Of the medical directors all sat together. There were weekly meetings where we went through all the programs and discussed issues with all the programs. So it was a huge accelerator for me in terms of
education across all these different assets.
Exposure. And every time I was there for about 6 years, every time I would get comfortable and achieve a plateau, I would get another role. And so the company was really expanding rapidly. They just had the first Tecfidera readout, so there was suddenly, exceeded everyone's expectations. It was a big inflow of capital.
Now it was a hot company.
Now it was a hot company. And there was this, I wasn't so interested in the stock price or the, Wall Street metrics. For me, what was really important was this exercise of what they called at the time, open the aperture, of like looking beyond neuroscience, looking at other kind of adjacent therapeutic areas. And I established a reputation as being somebody who would like take on the extra projects and look into the diligence things. And if somebody was doing a diligence project or thinking about, doing some new area, that was like,
you got the call.
I got the call because I would say yes, and I was prepared to do the nights and weekends projects. And that is another great tip for people early in their career, because some of the companies that I did diligence on at that time, I then felt like I was a stakeholder in those companies or that deal or that transaction. So the stuff that didn't happen, I was able to look, follow those companies subsequently and say, what happened? Did, that risk that we identified actually manifest? Or was it not? And when you have that ability to learn from others, it's just an amazing kind of learning experience. And so that was amazing. But they had just acquired a small company in Waltham looking at Fc fusion technology, and 2 of the lead assets were in hemophilia. So this was a neuroscience company, a lot of really smart neuroscientists. Nobody knew anything about hemophilia. And so I got this knock, the head of regulatory at the time knocked on my door, literally like 5 o'clock some evening, I'm packing up. And she said, do you know anything about hemophilia? And I'm like, funny you should ask, because I actually have a family history of hemophilia.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, great, you have a new job.
You're in charge.
That's awesome. You're now. I'm like, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not a hematologist. I don't know. That doesn't make me an expert. But and that ended up being kind of one of these opportunities career-wise, where I was able to go out, help integrate this newly acquired company. These two assets, it turned out, were really interesting, and we're in kind of late phase development. So we got both of those approved. And then I kind of made a name for myself of being able to do kind of strange and new things. And, one opportunity led to the other. I had an opportunity to lead the nusinersen program, which was Spinraza, which was amazing. So you just end up kind of accumulating experiences, which was wonderful.
So the lucky thing was like, I happen to have a family history of hemophilia, but the make your own luck part of it was having showed up, having said yes, having delivered, so that the person comes to your office.
Yes.
Kind of.
Yes, yeah. And being open and approachable, I think that was a key.
How many drugs were you involved with that got to approval?
So we had 3 during that period of time.
Yeah. Which is kind of a crazy.
It was crazy. I mean, actually, I thought that I was this amazing picker.
Everything I touched. Solid gold.
This is wonderful. I have just this amazing ability that like every project I work with seems to end in success. But as we know, that's not the case in this industry. It was just kind of a lucky streak, but a lot of fun and huge amount of learning.
So you roll out of Biogen. Why did you decide to leave? And is that when you moved to becoming a CEO?
No. So Biogen at the time was going through a strategic review of, how it could, sometimes growth is great, but it's also a problem, right? Because everyone expects, the stock has increased a lot, it's going to continue to increase a lot. And so one of the strategic decisions that was made at that point in time was the hemophilia assets had been commercialized, but we weren't actually seeing a lot of shareholder value being delivered from those assets and that revenue. And it was also kind of a difficult fit with a neuroscience company, and aducanumab was coming along that was going to require a lot of focus and resources. So a decision was made to spin out the hemophilia programs into a separate company, which became Biotech. Had that decision not been made, I'd probably still be at Biogen. But it kind of forced me to make a decision of, do I want to go to Biotech? Do I want to stay at Biogen? What's going to happen at that point? Or door number 3. Right? Or do an alternative, door number 3. So it was like, I was like, I haven't, even thought about, moving outside. But this was the point where your life is going to change one way or another, right? These were essentially going to be 2 different companies. So I might as well look at, whether there's a door number 3 option. And so one of the first companies that came about was Synlogic, and I joined there as Chief Medical Officer, so not as CEO.
That's right, I forgot that.
I actually thought, at the time, I thought Chief Medical Officer was the best job in the world, because you have a seat at the table. You're still really close to the science and the strategy, but you get to have a say in the decisions that are made without having ultimate responsibility.
Right. Hopefully you can sleep a little better. Poor CEOs.
And the company was in this rapid period of growth. It had just closed a Series B, and had an opportunity to go public through reverse merger. This was all, of course, completely new to me. I was so insulated from any kind of investor relations or finance stuff at Biogen. I was part of the R&D organization. So very far away from it. So this was a whole other element that I had to learn. And it was a really interesting experience, and it was great to see it from the CMO seat. So that was wonderful. But then
that's sort of the perfect chair, isn't it? Kind of, if you have I guess back to your point, if you have a CEO who's collaborative and shares and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you get to experience a lot. And then about 6 months into the company being public, the board approached me and said, we're going to make leadership change. Are you interested? And my first reaction was, God, no. It's like, you've got the wrong girl. This is not, even my fans would not consider me to be a, candidate for this kind of job.
Really? You thought that even at that point?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had a 2-year-old at home. I had this vision of CEOs spending their time on airplanes, going to golfing trips, and that kind of stuff. I'm like, no, that's not me. But luckily at the time, there was some really great board members, and they were like, look, we see this in you. We see this in you, and try it for a while. We've been impressed, whatever. So I decided to give it a go. And yeah, that was kind of the first CEO role.
That's a wild story. When did you become CEO? What time?
So that was around, I became a CEO about 6 months after the reverse merger happened, which was, again, a baptism of fire.
Yes.
But I think there's kind of a pattern here, because just like my first role in industry, the people around you and, really being able to leverage the board for advice, formal and informal. It was great. Every investment banker that came to visit the company got grilled for the first 6 months. I used to joke that was kind of my MBA, but I wouldn't let them leave without explaining exactly the mechanics of a recent financing that they had led. They come in with their flip pages, and I'm like, can I really drill down on this and really grill them on.
I had a banker say to me once, because I was asking a lot of questions, and he said, a lot of CEOs they mostly do the talking. They mostly don't ask questions. And I thought, my God, so what a missed opportunity.
I know.
I don't want to listen to myself for the whole time.
I know. So that was kind of my, mini MBA and first education in being a CEO.
So let's jump to, SynLogic. Let's jump to what happened.
Yes, yeah. So it was this really interesting platform company. Really based, the premise of the company was that you could engineer bacteria to kind of be a more precise microbiome manipulation. So we were developing therapies for rare metabolic disease. And things started to become a little difficult. It was taking longer, requiring more resources than we thought. So we shrank down to really focusing on one program, which is a program in a rare metabolic disease called PKU. A lot of support from the advocacy community and organization. They really felt like this could be great for kids with PKU in particular, where, managing the blood Phe levels early in life is just so critical for long-term outcomes. And we started doing a phase 3 study with the understanding that we had an interim. It really had to be good data to support moving forward. And when we unblinded the interim, it just, didn't meet the mark. And we were in a difficult situation at that point in time. We didn't have the capital, or, we're unlikely to be able to raise the capital to kind of go back again and do the full diagnostic and iterate and redesign and come forward. So we had to make the really difficult decision to shut the company down and discontinue the program. So that's kind of how that venture ended.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as we look around now, there's been a fair amount of talk lately in the sort of Cambridge ecosystem about how more biotech companies still need to shut their doors. We've had some return funds to investors, but we've also had a bunch of companies say like, hey, I've got another idea.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that the general consensus from everybody except the teams at those companies is that there should be less of that. And that the cycle of creative destruction is kind of a big part of what makes the system work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the special sauce of the U.S. innovation ecosystem. It's kind of the edge we have over our competitors in China. We actually have this system that supports failure and try and attempt and try to make things work and move on to the next idea and recycle this idea over here, recycle the people, the cash goes back into the system. I think that's a real special sauce, and it works in Cambridge, in Boston, Massachusetts, because you have that proximity. People are scooped up by other companies who benefit from the training and the experience that those individuals have had in their prior companies. And I think that's a really special thing about this ecosystem that we live in.
You mentioned China, but if you contrast it with Europe, do you think that we've got amazing scientists in Europe? There's not as much access to capital, but there's some. How much of it do you think is about that sort of appetite for risk and the reputational hit that somebody might take if a company fails, versus here where it's kind of like, if you did it well, people are like, well, she managed a really tough situation well. She's ready for the next thing, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big thing that places like San Francisco and Boston have going for them. It's that cultural piece. It's the absence of shame when something doesn't work out and walks away. And I've never worked, I've worked in the hospital setting in Europe, but I've never worked in biotech or startup. But when I meet colleagues who are kind of close observers of those ecosystems, I think it's much more difficult to do that. I think you kind of carry those scars with you here, I think it's almost like considered like graduating, graduating from School of Hard Knocks.
She must have learned a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wonder what she's going to do differently next time. And people will follow you and continue to support you, even though you didn't make the money in the last investment.
Yep.
So I think that's just something really special that we have to guard and maintain.
So that's what happened, right? So then that company shut down. Was it 6 months later that that Climb got going? Or?
Oh yeah. So about 6 months later, I got the call here. Actually, I think it was maybe even not that long.
Okay.
It could be maybe 3 months. So I finished in March, and then I started here in this company right before the 4th of July.
Okay. Yeah. I remember when Synlogic shut down, or SynBio, shut down. Wait, what's
Synlogic? Yeah.
Synlogic. Okay, great. So, shut down, and then your email disappeared. Yeah. And I was like, I wonder what happened, what Aoife's up to. And I think I looked on LinkedIn, and either you had just announced or you were in stealth, or so there was some kind of a reference. Like, okay, she's got something cooking. Yeah. Okay.
I know. We'll be back with the podcast in a moment. Hi, I'm Aoife Brennan, CEO of Climb Bio. At Climb Bio, we're driven by a clear and urgent mission to deliver high-impact disease-modifying medicines for people living with immune-mediated diseases. Our team brings together deep immunology expertise and drug development experience. We're united by the belief that people deserve therapies that ultimately give them more quality time with less time thinking of themselves as patients. 2025 was our year of execution. We operated with discipline and purpose, advancing our differentiated monoclonal antibody programs, Budo and Climb 116, both rooted in clinically validated B-cell targets. These efforts reflect our commitment to developing therapies with strong clinical profiles and meaningful potential for people living with serious immune-mediated conditions. This momentum propels us into 2026, a year of ascent. We enter a data-rich period that will shape the next steps in our mission. With multiple clinical readouts ahead, we're positioned to convert progress into measurable impact across indications with high unmet need. At Climb Bio, every step in our journey matters. Every insight, every collaboration, every data point moves us closer to a future where immune-mediated diseases are met with transformative, targeted immune medicines that change lives. Now, back to the podcast.
Okay, so what did that person propose to you? What state was?
The call? Yeah. So it was. It's funny when you go through a transition like that. We had a really close team at Synlogic.
Yeah.
You go through a grieving process of, you suddenly spend a long time building something up and then it gets ripped away. And a lot of people said, I initially thought, I'm going to jump straight back into something. And people are like, no, take your time. And you get these decks and people start calling you. And I knew my heart wasn't in it because I was just like, delete. And that's part of knowing when you're ready to go again. It's when you're actually open to you're curious. Like you're like, I want to open that deck. I want to see what they're doing. And a lot of the opportunities were like very similar in terms of like scope and stage and everything else. But then this opportunity came up and it was just so different from anything else that had been proposed to me.
Okay.
And I thought, I kind of need to pay attention to this one. And it was also very unique in that I thought my plan had been to take, more time on the beach, as it were.
Yes, as they say.
But I thought, okay, if I don't look into this one now, it may not be available like September, October.
That
so
might be an interesting question too, is if you feel that a little bit of FOMO, then maybe it is time to grab it. You know what I mean?
I know, and that was kind of the sign, right, of like time to go. So at the time, Climb was not Climb, it was Elium.
Right.
And it did an IPO in 21. So it was a neuroscience-focused company. A lot of investor interest. They did a very successful IPO, raised money. But then similar to the Synlogic story, right, the investment thesis just disappeared. Yep. And, the right decision was made of okay, there's capital here. We have a NASDAQ listing. We're just going to pause operations and reevaluate what's next for this company. The lead investor was Andrew Levin at RA Capital. He's wonderful, continues to be involved in the company. And, they had the idea of let's rebuild a public company using the capital that's available, but repositioning it in a different therapeutic area where there's more investor appetite, where the science is more exciting. And so that decision had been made. they had identified a target company that they wanted to acquire. They wanted the shell to acquire, but there was no management team at the private company, which was called Tenant. No management team at Elium. A couple of people in finance just maintaining the listing, but everyone else had disappeared. There was, no banking support, no analyst coverage.
Yeah.
A lot of the day-to-day kind of functions of a public company had atrophied at that point.
Makes sense.
And so there was this realization, okay, we need to grow rapidly if we're going to be successful, like kind of regroup and reposition the company. And so that was when I got the call. So there was, a clinical asset that had some really interesting clinical data and a lot of capital. So, we could look for other assets, really think about positioning this kind of one asset that they had found at that time in the right way.
It's public, the number, right? So I think so. How much capital was on the
balance sheet? So there was about 120, it was about 100 million when the kind of acquisition happened. And then there was a pipe of 120 raised kind of concurrent with that. So that was great.
You had a pretty big pocketbook.
Yeah. Yep. No kind of long-term lease obligations, no big research organization that needed to be sustained. So that optionality, and I had a good sense, it's part of what you learn being a CEO, right? That there's always, next year is going to be different. Yeah. And, the biotech markets are going to open up. There's going to be loads of IPOs.
We are a collection of optimists. Yes.
We've been through a couple of cycles where that did not come to fruition.
It's been a tough time for optimists.
I know, tough time for optimists. And, so I thought, okay, there's at least a,
bunch
good
of runway.
Yep.
And
who knows?
What employee number were you? Do you remember?
Well, it did, because we kind of went down and then went back up again. But we started off with, I think, 3 or 4, and then we're now up to maybe 27.
Yeah. That's crazy. So what an interesting thing to have no infrastructure, but none of the baggage either.
Yes, exactly.
So you really could kind of build it from scratch.
Yeah, and it was wonderful because I remember having the initial conversation with some of the board members and being like, do you mind where the headquarters is? The headquarters had been in Seattle and then a small office in Cambridge, UK. And it was like, no, you run the company, you go for it, make decisions, start, rebuilding.
Let's go.
Yeah, so it was kind of crazy that first summer of just I'd gone from having a public company, but having a, chief people officer, chief financial officer, chief legal officer, and now suddenly there's none of those
You're
things.
A chief everything officer.
Chief everything. I had to learn how to do a DocuSign. I was putting a DocuSign in, sending it to myself, signing it, downloading it, doing the whole thing. So that was kind of this surreal experience, but also a lot of fun. Yep. It was really fun, and it's a good kind of validation of yourself when you can start again from scratch and actually, pull up the blank piece of paper, start drafting, a corporate deck, do some of those things from really nothing.
I mean, the problem is you really can't blame anybody because there's no legacy. It's like, yep, these are my team, my structure.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about the assets a little bit. So, what got you excited about the science in the pipeline?
Yeah, so it's kind of everything happens for a reason, right? And earlier that spring, I'd gone to an academic meeting where I heard George Shett, who did a lot of the CD19 CAR T, an amazing innovator. I mean, he just took something that was working in oncology and started to think about could this really help really severe SLE patients?
So exciting, yeah.
And so the first, kind of cohort of data from that, and just being really wow, this is pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. But I'd come from a complex platform company, right?
Yeah.
Where we were trying to do so, and all the manufacturing issues and all of the demonstrating, that there's no variability in product quality attributes and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh my goodness, I understood that, this is really interesting data, but also really challenging.
Long ways from there to commercial.
Yeah. And just, when you get to commercial, just, I can't see this, being deployed everywhere, right? So it's going to be specialist centers and everything else. But really interesting. And so that kind of got me thinking about the whole CD19 B-cell depletion space. It was really evident to me that we were only scratching the surface, that, some of the outcomes that he had achieved in this kind of experiment or in these patients really kind of opened the door for a kind of renaissance of some of the B-cell depletion stuff that we've kind of known since rituximab, but now I think we know so much more. Mm-hmm. And so the Budo had some data that had been studied in a small phase 1b study in PMN. And so I got to see that as part of the kind of coming on board. And I thought, this looks like a drug.
Safety profile looks good.
Safety profile looks good. You know, if we can treat and deplete the right B cells with something that's scalable and can be delivered in an infusion center, like a monoclonal,
Yeah.
you know, low cost of goods, we know how to manufacture these things. You know, they plug into a regular supply chain.
Scales really well.
Scales really well, and could be good for patients, right, at the end of the day.
So I want to interrupt you there. One of the things that a couple of CEOs have leaned into on the podcast is the importance of having a commercial model in mind for your drug. Sounds like you were thinking about that from the very beginning.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you learn something, you accumulate scar tissue
Right.
as you go through, and really thinking like everybody in this industry puts patients first, right? Like, I mean, it's hard to, you never meet a CEO who said, yeah, we don't care about
I don't care much about the patients, right.
But I think there's this element of kind of pragmatism and realizing that the vast majority of healthcare is not delivered in the Mass General Hospital, you know? Like there is kind of this element of pragmatically, how is this going to get like that last mile of like getting to the real patients in need, and really thinking about how your product is going to fit into that in the long run. I think it's just super, super important. And so that was a big element to the draw of like, wow, you know, naked monoclonal, but, you know, potential to deplete B cells, and we know from CAR T that this is, you know, if you can do this
There's a path,
get the right dose, there could be a really interesting path. So that kind of got, you know, my attention. And then of course, you know, when I saw this come, I was like, oh, this could be cool. And that's where the name Climb comes from, silent B.
Oh.
Yes, yeah. So we decided, you know, Elium was a very neuroscience branding and everything else, and we made that. I actually didn't want to do I was like, Elium's a fine name. We can just change the website. It'll be fine. But no, it was like, no. You know, you need to pick a new name, because you know, the attorneys sent me this long list of the things you need to do when you change the company name. And I was like,
pick a new
yeah,
name.
I kind of really like Elium now. I've really decided Elium's a great name. But you know, we went through this exercise, which was a ton of fun actually. You know, in retrospect, of choosing a new name. And you know, when we caught on this, you know, Climb with the silent
I love
B,
it.
and,
I didn't
you
know
was
that.
kind of
Okay.
the B cell at the center here. So that was kind of fun.
Okay. Where are we now? Where is the?
So we've rebranded. We've, you know, that was October of 24, and then towards the end of the year, we started to think about an additional complementary asset, and we did kind of a search. Ended up in licensing an asset that's called 116. It's an April targeted monoclonal, and I think the overarching strategy for the company is really focused on, you know, protein biologics for immune-mediated diseases, where we really think we can make a big difference for patients, and making sure that we leverage the really interesting science in this area to benefit as many patients as possible.
And are you thinking, Aoife, when you look at these options, are you considering stuff that's very early as well as stuff that might have been through a trial someplace, it's on the shelf somewhere?
Yeah.
Like what, the full range?
We don't have any research capabilities here.
We
deal with a lot of contract research organizations, so we don't have a huge, you know, search and eval team. I think we kind of like to stick to where we kind of diseases and areas of science where we know. We look at something from, you know, a year pre-IND. We can do all of that piece, and we have a great regulatory team who understand how to get these, you know, programs moving into the clinic. And then, you know, taking it forward from there. But I don't think we would ever, you know, start super early with like a concept or something that's, you know, pre kind of
I think that's
candidate.
That's kind of another great point, isn't it? That like knowing what you're good at, not trying to, like, not fooling yourself and saying we can do everything. Instead, like picking your lane, building a team that can deliver in that lane. It feels like that's...
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I had that experience at Synlogic where, you know, we had metabolic disease. At one point we were thinking about doing oncology, and you really do need, you know, to do any of these things, you need the team who have that experience. And you end up then with really high burn when you're building teams in multiple
places,
areas where you need that expertise, and there's lack of fungibility between. So you can't have somebody who's like, you know, spent their life in oncology and say, hey, you know, in your spare time,
over to
go
neuro.
over and do this thing. You know, that kind of early on, that's possible, where it's, you know, more about the science. Once you start going into the clinic,
forget it.
it becomes really difficult. It really does. And you need to spend so much time close to the prescribers, get, as you know, in your business, getting to know the sites.
Yep.
So having to spread that across, you know, multiple different therapeutic areas, you know, multiple sets of academic conferences, it just becomes very challenging to manage.
Do you think that's a recognized issue? Like, it feels like there are, I won't name any names, but it feels like there are a bunch of biotechs that have been maybe overly ambitious in the breadth of things that they tackle. I think what you're describing is a pretty focused effort to go after.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be this tension between focus and optionality.
Okay.
And it's not that either one is good or bad. I think there's periods in a company's life cycle where optionality is great. There are periods when you just need to zoom in and be laser focused.
100%.
And then you earn the right to expand and do additional things with additional optionality. So, you know, it's, I think that tension should be, and it's a healthy thing to constantly be asking yourself as a CEO, like, is now the time to zoom in? Is now the time to zoom out? It's not like, you know, it's always focus or it's always, you know, maximum optionality. I think there's time. And when you're early in research when you don't know what biology is going to play out, like having multiple shots on goal is great. When you get into the clinic and you become a public company, you know, the reality is most investors are just focused on that lead indication. You better choose well, because if you don't, everything else coming behind will be judged on your success or failure. And then once you've demonstrated you can create value, I think you earn the right to do additional things.
That's great. So it's not add additional assets or additional therapy areas or whatever to de-risk it. It's earn the right to get there by delivering with a focused success.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think we've seen that play out over and over again in terms of, you know, how the companies that have been successful versus those who, you know, just have burned through, you know, hundreds of millions with nothing to show for it. It's this kind of period of time and knowing when to focus in to get something, move something forward versus spread wider.
Amazing. Okay, advice now. Imagine you were talking to a doc who is thinking about joining or looking at a first CEO job. We talked a little bit about the move kind of into the sort of for-profit biotech world, but advice for a first-time CEO. What do you wish somebody had said to you, or what did someone say to you that might be helpful to somebody who's stepping into that kind of chair?
Yeah, so I mean, I have this conversation a lot.
Yes.
The first thing I would say is, like, there's no one phenotype for CEO.
Amen.
Right?
Yes.
You kind of, I think there's always this assumption that you have to be this like uber charismatic, extrovert, gray-haired male,
yes.
tall, dark, and tall, handsome.
Yeah,
you know, this kind of like, we have this vision that's ingrained in us from early life, probably.
Right. Don't get a lot of short presidents of the United States, you know.
Oh yeah, with first names that can't be pronounced.
Correct. Yeah.
That was another issue. So, you know, I think there's no one archetype. You can, some people who like look like they should be great CEOs are like disasters, and some people who just do not look like they're good CEO material, or like our traditional kind of concept of CEO. You can be an introverted CEO. You can be, so, I mean, I think there's multiple ways to be successful.
Yeah.
But you cannot do it where your ego is driving you. I think that is just critical. You have to do it because you want to build a company, do something for patients, you know, grow an organization. If you're driven by something that's going to
the greater glory
status,
of yourself.
Yes. Yeah, it just doesn't work. And you'll make stupid decisions for the business because you're putting your ego, you know, you want to build an empire, I want to, you know, run $1 billion market cap company, rather than really looking at the reality of what you have and what you need, what's the best decision for this like organization. So there's this concept of level 5 leader where, you know, you have to put the organization before yourself. And even if it means, you know, the right decision is to lay yourself off, you know, that I am no longer the leader here.
Yes.
And I think to your earlier point around companies shutting down, if you're a CEO where your only sense of worth comes from that CEO title and you're kind of clinging to this for dear life, it's really hard for you to make the right decision for your shareholders, for patients, for employees when those tough times come about.
I just interrupt and we'll double click on level 5 leadership. I think that's from, is it from Good to Great?
Yeah.
And he finds Jim Collins. Oh, he finds all these businesses that had these unassuming, kind, thoughtful leaders who don't look like they fit that pattern, right?
Yeah.
So we'll link to that in the notes.
Yeah. The pattern of these people who were kind of unassuming, put the organizations first, I think was, and I do think there's truth to it.
I do too. By the way, especially in life sciences,
yes,
I think you get a lot of lovely mission-driven people.
Yeah, that I think is important. But yeah, anyway,
so that's great. So that's kind of the first one is don't rule yourself out.
Yes.
Kind
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, don't rule yourself out. Don't judge people by, kind of what they look and the phenotype. I think the second thing is making sure it's not, an ego-driven decision, that it's not validation. You have to separate the job from your own sense of self.
Yes.
And I think that's just a really important kind of resilience thing as well. It's successful, great. That doesn't mean that you're, necessarily, this is a company, right? It's separate from you as an individual. I think the final piece is, there's lots of things that you don't necessarily need to be a good leader, but the one thing that's absolutely essential is courage.
Yeah.
I think courage to make the decision, courage to go out on a limb, take the risk, do the right thing, even when it's difficult, even when it's not necessarily what people want to hear. And I think when you see, CEOs who've gotten into trouble or been involved in situations that have ended in absolute disaster and taken the industry into disrepute, it's often because they've found themselves in a really tough spot, and instead of having the courage to face it and tell the truth
do the brave thing,
ended up taking this kind of slippery slope of the path of least resistance, and suddenly you're Theranos. I think that's that's the really critical thing, and people can sense that. Your team. It's very difficult to lead a team when you're not a courageous leader.
I think that's right. Unpack for me the second one about separating yourself from the decision about the job. Were there tools or ways or people, or how did you manage that to make sure you were kind of, how did you check yourself on that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the first point was the decision to take on the opportunity to be a CEO for the first time.
Yes.
Because the first thing that comes is like, if this is a failure, it's going to damage me for life and I'll never get another job. And the first thing that happened to it hopped into my brain was, can I ever go back to be a CMO? Can I reclaim my old career path?
Right.
This doesn't end well.
Right.
And I actually think that's when I speak to a lot of particularly females who are interested in doing it for the first time, they kind of feel like they have zero margin for error.
Yeah.
And if you go into it, particularly in this industry, where like 9 out of 10 companies
everything
for
fails,
various
my God,
reasons fail, and you can make all the right decisions and do the right thing, and it ends in failure. That can be a huge deterrent of taking that step, putting yourself out there, putting yourself on a limb. Because for better, for worse, the press loves the personality of the CEO. So when they write a story about Klein Bio,
it's going to be
9 times out of 10, it's Aoife's picture.
Yes.
And when things are going great, that's great.
Aoife's happy.
When things are
Bad
not going
days,
so great,
not so
there's
great.
still that stock image of Aoife smiling in the camera, and it just looks horrible. So that I think is really difficult. But people who manage it and do it in a healthy way realize that success and failure are both imposters, right?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, what is the line? You're never as good as your press on your best day, or as bad as you are on your worst.
Exactly.
Yeah. By the way, maybe you should consider having a sad Aoife picture ready to go, so that if there is bad news, guys, we have a picture for you.
News. Here's one ready to go. Actually, at least I've moved on. It used to be when you work in any kind of microbiome company, it would be like a poop emoji. So,
of course, that's true.
Like, when it's bad news, you can show the poop emoji. When it's good news, you can show the smiley picture.
I hadn't thought of that. That is, that's maybe a consideration.
That was a problem. So I'm glad to have left those days behind, and now we can move on and talk about these ones.
All right, we're going to move to the lightning round and just ask for some quick questions. So, as an Irish woman, what's the best place in Boston to get a good pint of Guinness?
Oh, I don't drink Guinness. No, the reason I only drink Guinness in Ireland is because I will do the sacrilegious thing that like every Irish person will judge me for.
Yeah.
Put blackcurrant. Number one, I'll have a glass, which is a half pint.
Yeah.
And number two, I will put blackcurrant cordial in the Guinness to take away some of that bitterness.
Yes.
And that's not something that usually unless you have an Irish barmaid or barman, like they don't get it.
They don't even know what that is.
So they don't even have that is.
Right.
But Guinness is too heavy, too bitter for me. But so that's a tip for people who don't like Guinness. A little bit of blackcurrant cordial.
All right, we'll take that as a win on the Guinness question. Is there an Irish phrase or expression that sneaks into your language that your team has had to learn?
Yes. I mean, I've tried to adopt Americanisms.
Yeah, you've been here a while.
I've been a while. And I'm known for colorful language
Well, again,
that crosses the line on occasion into profanity, which, is anyone who works for me will know that that's valid. But there's a couple where I haven't ever been able to find an American version of the Irish phrase. And the one that, is the most problematic is this phrase called dog in a manger. You're being a dog in a manger about that. And people are like, what dog in a manger? But it's, Irish people are fairly familiar. It's the dog won't get out of the manger but can't eat the hay and won't let others who will eat the hay into the manger.
Yeah.
And it's this phrase that just describes a lot of business scenarios.
Let's
right?
agree. There are a lot of dogs in mangers.
Where it's like a lot of dog and manger kind of situations, right, that you use. So that's one that I use a lot in business contexts, and it's pretty clean, and there's no,
right.
Yeah, so that's one that
you don't
I
have to worry that somebody's child is in the background.
I know.
I've had that happen.
Like skin a cat, and it's a cat lover, and they like go pale, and it's like, oh God, I said it, you're a cat lover, aren't you? So dog in a manger is pretty applicable.
Fantastic. Is there a first hire that or a key resource you look to if you're doing a company reset?
Yes, I think the key person is kind of this operational penknife in smaller companies, because for most things you will reach out to experts, right? You have an expert law firm, you have expert accounting firms where a specific thing is needed, but these individuals around our industry who love company building, love early stage organizations, can do everything from find an office space to hire a CRO for a phase 1 trial and everything in between, are just so valuable because you can kind of divide and conquer with them then and partner with them to kind of help get things going initially. And it often becomes difficult because at some point they put themselves out of a job. Right?
Yeah, because you hire people. Their job becomes filled by several specialists.
Exactly.
Right?
As you grow, you need a full-time CFO or you need a CBO. But in the early days, that the value that can be created by having that right partner is really tremendous.
Okay, I love that. And I think important sort of side note there, in this ecosystem in Cambridge, lots of people who fit that description, right?
And who love this early stage of development.
Yeah, go from company to company
Great.
Is there a book or article or podcast that you recommend, or multiples that you recommend to people who join your team?
Yeah, so I kind of have a hang up about graphics and making a good slide and telling a story with data.
Okay.
So it used to be, this is like the complete geek in me, but early on, as I was building teams, I would give everybody, that Edward Tufte book,
yeah,
of data.
My God, yeah.
Still a classic.
Still a classic.
In the era of AI, it's become even more important that people are really thoughtful about how to create graphics to tell a story.
Because it's too easy to make something.
You put something in ChatGPT, it throws up some kind of, I think it's called work slop.
Yeah.
But when you're really thoughtful about how to create a really compelling graphic, you only need 1 or 2 per presentation, and if you get that right, it can really make or break a conversation, how things go. So I think that's a really important skill set that people from all technical backgrounds really need to nail if they're going to be successful.
And that's also a really beautiful book, right? It's if I remember correctly.
It's a coffee table book.
Yes, yeah.
Full of content and examples of different graphics. I have to rebuy
that. I don't have a copy of that anymore. I did at one point.
Christmas is coming.
Fantastic, fantastic.
It's in my Amazon, buy again. Because,
it's on the list.
So many copies.
And then finally, is there a lesson from shutdowns or turnarounds that you would suggest CEOs write onto their monitor or in indelible ink?
Yeah, it's kind of like when you get into a black cab in London and what the cabbie tells you.
Yeah.
Cash is king.
Yes, indeed.
It's like, do you take credit cards? No, cash is king. And, in this industry, cash is king.
Yeah.
And really being thoughtful. Sometimes it's easy when, you've that big bank balance to, yes, approve.
Yes.
But really understanding the difference between, spend and value, and what's really creating value commensurate with the dollar. And that can mean, saying yes to something, but it often means kind of saying no to something and kind of recognizing that delta could be really important. Could be an extra quarter of cash or runway. And having been through various twists and turns, you really take a different look at how you manage companies.
Have you experienced biotech investors to be more like go, you got to go fast, or more be careful, be frugal, or both?
I don't think anyone ever wants you to be frugal because you can't save your way out of
a pre-commercial
to
biotech.
Value. No, that's not how you do. But I think efficient execution is really critical. And you see companies just making such stupid decisions and doing stuff that is not creating value and chasing things that really don't matter, and where that you can suck up a ton of resources. And it's, as a CEO, when somebody comes to you with a simple decision, should we maintain the, entity in the UK? Oh, yeah. And then only 2 years later, do you realize
how much that cost? Yeah.
Oh, like we're closing books on 2 companies, like that's, driving up our audit fees, all this stuff. So really digging in and making sure that you understand those kind of, simple decisions and the implications they have on a cash and value basis, I think is really important.
All right, that's fantastic. I think we'll end there. Aoife Brennan, what a
so
pleasure
much.
to have you on the podcast.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, more to come. We'll have a deeper dive into some of this Guinness stuff another time.
We have to do it in Dublin then.
Fair enough.
Deal.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Welcome, producer Adam.
Hey, Chris. I've been hearing the name Aoife Brennan for a very long time from you, and it was just great to have her on the pod. She was a wonderful guest and just had so many things that were interesting to talk about.
Yeah, I completely agree. She's really the full package. You get smart people and you get people who are good talkers. It's not always true that you get both. And she has a wonderful set of experiences. It was a really fun conversation.
Yeah, I want to start by double clicking on the telling the dancer from the dance.
Yeah.
How do you get Biotech Vision to see the complete picture?
It's a really fair question. I think that most biotech CEOs and investors are, I'm going to say, appropriately humble. If you come into this industry thinking like I'm probably going to, step up to the plate and hit a home run every time, the biotech universe has a way of disabusing you of that notion. So I think, what we've seen from different CEOs and investors we've had on is trying to get signal as quickly as possible. So you start with a plausible thesis, you do your research, you develop a pathway that you think makes sense, et cetera. And then how can I most quickly get an answer? And we've seen some of our guests do things like trying to buy an asset that's already got a well-known safety, profile, because that takes some of the risk out of the equation. Other people are starting from scratch, and then they're trying to figure out, how do I get into a phase 1 trial efficiently, and how do I get that trial done as quickly and inexpensively as possible to see if I'm really, really onto something here. And I think that's going to continue to be an intense focus from all of the kinds of folks that we talk to.
Agreed. So one of the things that I really liked about this episode was that Aoife offered a personal point of view on what happens when a company is unsuccessful in this industry. It happens. Yeah. And so how do you pick up the pieces in this situation?
It's a really tough and important topic, and you're right, it doesn't get nearly enough attention. I guest taught a couple of classes at Harvard Business School a couple of weeks ago, and several of the students made that point that they would like to hear more from unsuccessful alumni coming and talking and telling, or folks from the entrepreneurial world coming and telling their stories. Understandably, if you say, I think, to someone, hey, would you like to come to Harvard and tell everybody how awesome you are, you could probably get more easy yeses that way than from people who come and tell a painful story about something that did not work. But we all learn a lot from the failures that we have in life. We all have failures and setbacks. And I think Aoife is refreshingly candid about all of that stuff. Frankly, that comes from a place of having had also a bunch of success. So I think it's easier to talk about your failures when you can also point to, I brought this drug to market and I succeeded here and there, et cetera. But still, many talented people don't feel great about telling the times that they had setbacks. And I think you're sort of doing a disservice to the community if you don't do that, because it's easy to look at someone who seems like they've got it all together and think that they've always been like that, or the fact that they always are like that. And the truth is that's not what almost, and no one that I know has a career or a life that looks like that, where everything just kind of clicks perfectly from one thing to the next.
I really agree with that. And one of the things, if I can get off topic a second, that it really reminds me of is the kind of attention, or lack of attention, I should say, that rescue trials get. It really reminds me of the fact that these things are needed, and yet It's not something they talk about, and that in relation, of course, to a CEO who learned a valuable lesson in moving forward, and no one gets to know about it.
Yeah, it's a great point. Rescue trials, it is often hard for management teams to admit that they've got enough of a problem that they need to consider bringing in some additional help to make a change. And we do talk about rescue, but we'll also talk about providing additional support, adding additional geographic areas or help with a particular area of a trial that's struggling, whether that's in the data finalization or in the patient recruitment phases.
Yes, that's perfect. So I'm going to get back on track here.
Yeah, right.
In terms of her insight into the CEO role, I liked what she said about the dog in the manger and how, the importance of self-worth and growth and courage. How do you balance all that?
Well, I think everybody does it differently, and I would say one of the things that's unavoidable, especially the first time you're in a CEO chair, but in general, is a certain amount of imposter syndrome and questioning of the value that you're bringing, and a lot of self-criticism, right? It is unavoidable to not look back on any time in a tough role and think like, well, I wish I'd made that decision faster, or I'd realized that more quickly, or whatever the thing might be. And so I think her point was, there's this important balance that you have to strike between trying to learn from the things that didn't go well, but also not letting those challenges cripple you so that you can't act effectively as you go forward. Because teams want leaders who have a realistically optimistic sense of the future. If they think that you're kooky and you're smoking something, then you lose the support of the troops. But similarly, if you kind of are walking around predicting gloom and doom, that's not really a rallying cry either. So you need to sort of find that middle ground. And some of that is again about incorporating the learning that you have over your career. This is true, I think, for all of us, right? We if we're honest, we've all made plenty of mistakes, and hopefully we've learned lessons from them.
Agreed. So, talking about careers, let's talk about the operational penknife, these valuable individuals who can do everything in an organization. I don't know if in your past role you have ever done anything like that. Myself, when you're in a small organization or people are on vacation or things like that, you have to jump in and kind of do everything. But also, I want to ask you about what happens to these individuals, afterwards.
Yeah, it's I loved that example, and she talked about how there's a bunch of people in the Boston ecosystem. I'm sure it's true in San Francisco as well. Anywhere where there's a biotech cluster, who have made their careers out of being kind of employee number two. So they follow that CEO. They're one of the early hires, and their job is solve all of the problems of the day. And as Aoife said, that's everything from hey, we're out of copier paper, to like go negotiate a lease for us or figure out what our benefits package should be. So a mix of high and low projects. And so the people who succeed at that have an ability both to really roll up their sleeves, low ego, willing to jump in to figure things out when they don't have direct experience or past experience, very good problem solvers, and cheerful in the face of adversity, I would say. And I've encountered a bunch of folks like that. I think they are incredibly valuable, and their value is highest in small and early stage organizations where you haven't moved to the point of specialization yet. I think that was very much her point. As you get bigger, you get finance professionals, you get operations executives, you get HR professionals, et cetera. You bring all these people in, and they are meant to be, and generally are, much better in their specific domain than this generalist is. But this generalist is cheap and ready to go and wears half a dozen of these hats in the early stages when it wouldn't make sense to hire a bunch of specialists. So highly valuable, and I think really interesting work. You asked though, like what happens to these people? One of two things. Sometimes they pick a lane and they decide, I'm actually quite interested in this particular functional expertise. I've got a mentor. I've found something that I want to do, and they step out of that kind of role and become a specialist. I guess there's three paths. Path two is they go and do that someplace else. So they see themselves as, I'm the early stage guy or gal. My job is to get us up and running. And then once we have, I'm going to go find another organization that needs help with that. And frankly, the fact that I've now done it 2, 3, 4 times increases my effectiveness and makes me attractive to the next company that wants to do that. That's also a viable path. And the third one is if the organization grows quickly, that person can develop into a chief of staff who's playing a sort of a version of an operating role, helping to coordinate as things get more complicated and complex across the organization. So I think those are the 3 ways folks do it. And the main thing is just to come into it with your eyes open about which of those paths, maybe plural, are options for you, and then to make those decisions so you're not caught by surprise. I think when this ends poorly is when someone thinks, I'm going to be able to play this generalist role forever. And if the company is succeeding, that's probably not the right answer.
No, it's an excellent answer. I think that's a good point of view on that. So my last thing is, this was, I think, our first episode that you were actually able to be in the office face to face with Aoife while you were doing the recording. Can you discuss that setup and how the benefits versus talking to people through Wi-Fi?
Yeah, so mostly it's benefit. There's a different kind of chemistry, as we all know, when you're live with people, and I really enjoyed that. I think we're going to try and do more of those. And in fact, Boston is a rich hunting ground for us. For example, Cambridge. So it would make sense, when I'm up there for us to maybe we'll record a couple of these in a row, do something like that. I definitely would like to see us do more of that. The only downside is you don't have access to your screen. The nice thing when I'm talking to somebody, as you know, we do a fair amount of prep, and I've got a set of questions I want to ask, and I can, without breaking eye contact or apparent eye contact with the person, I can see, here's the next thing that I wanted to ask. So in this case, you have to become more adept at managing your physical notes, but that seems to be a reasonable price to pay for a live conversation.
True. I will tell you, when I used to do interviews, the thing that I found the most difficult about face-to-face was the lighting. I felt like it was just burning on me the entire time.
Fair.
We're getting great content out of these hospital administrators, and yet at the same time I'm frying.
You're melting.
Under these lights.
Yeah.
So I'm glad. Again, it was a great episode, and like you said, I hope we have a chance to do more face-to-face podcast episodes.
Totally agree. Really, really fun. Thanks, Adam.
All right. Thanks, Chris.